I wanted to do a humorous video today, which actually will probably have a lot of takeaways. The video that I'm going to be doing today is almost flipping the world as it is if neurotypical people was at the receiving end of being made to feel like they are full of deficits. So imagine a world where autistic people and ADHD people run the world and how different normal might seem in comparison, and how wouldn't it be interesting if neurotypical people received the same feedback that us neurodivergent people receive? And again, this is just for humor. This is not for picking apart anybody. But I do think it would be interesting for maybe just a moment, if somebody neurotypical is watching this, just how it might feel to feel pathologized. And I also found it useful for myself because I think it highlighted actually some of the areas in which I maybe still mask, even though I thought I was well on my journey to unmasking, which I am. But there are still some key areas where the pathologizing of neurotypical behavior that I still fall habit into is maybe something that I need to work on. I asked ChatGPT to help me formulate a diagnostic and statistic manual for neurotypical, so your DSM, but for neurotypical people. This is a guide to understanding neurotypical behavior. Number 1, on the categories of identifying neurotypical behavior: social compliance disorder. Shows an excessive need to conform to social norms even when they make no logical sense. Experiences distress when deviating from arbitrary social expectations. Engages in unnecessary small talk instead of getting to the point. Number 2, monotropic aversion syndrome, or MAS. Struggling to focus intensely on a single subject of interest for extended periods of time. Easily distracted by unrelated stimulus, making deep dives into topics very difficult. Unable to experience joys from repeating the same activity over and over again. Number 3, emotional masking dependence, or EMD for short. Frequently hides authentic emotions and avoids discomfort. Uses passive-aggressive phrases like "I'm fine" when clearly they are not fine. Overly reliant on tone of voice and body language instead of clear communication. Number 4, routine resistance disorder, or RRD for short. Displays an aversion to structured routine, preferring spontaneity even when it is inefficient. Experiences distress when asked to eat the same meal multiple times in a row. Believes that trying new things is inherently superior to having consistent preferences. Number 5, eye contact fixation, or ECF for short. Insists on prolonged eye contact during conversations, regardless of somebody's comfort levels. Believes that a lack of eye contact is dishonesty or a lack of interest. Experiences discomfort when speaking without forced mutual gaze. Number 6, sensory seeking deficit, or SSD for short. Fails to notice subtle changes in sound, light, or texture that others might find overwhelming. They struggle to appreciate the rich world of stimming or fidgeting. They prefer bland food with no strong sensory input. Again, I know that could fall under either. I know that some people on the spectrum of autism might also experience that, but for me personally, I actually have hyposensitivity, so I actually prefer strong sensory input when it comes to food rather than a lack of sensory input because I'm not on the hypo profile. Anyway, back to it. Number 7, assumes that sarcasm is always obvious when in reality they're just reading social scripts. Might often say just be yourself, but then judge you for being yourself. So there is a lack of congruence between their words and their actions. They might also not realize how vague and unhelpful the advice of just be yourself is. To what extent is it okay? And to what extent will they judge you for that? Number 8, the double empathy gap syndrome, or DEGS for short. Having difficulties in understanding neurodivergent communication styles, but assumes that this issue is one-sided. expects others to adapt to their way of thinking without reciprocation, struggles to imagine perspectives outside of the social norms that they deem superior or the most adequate. Special Interest Deficit, or SID for short. Finds it difficult to hyperfocus on a passion for extended periods of time, cannot talk about a niche interest for hours without getting bored, calls intense focus obsession and obsessive instead of appreciating enthusiasm and a lifelong commitment to their interest. Diagnosis. If you have checked multiple boxes, you may be neurotypical. Fortunately, accommodations do exist with some treatment options. Let me know what you thought to this. There is actually quite a few more that are on here, but I just thought it was a really funny insight into how we are often treated and pathologized, and what it would feel like to be on the receiving end of that if you are used to a life of privilege or a life of not being pathologized, or a life of maybe just not understanding what it feels like to have the shoe on the other foot. But again, like I say, I found it useful because I also found it interesting to see what areas I might still mask in. Tell me what you think to this. Did you find it as funny as me?